All right, let's see how far we can get into this file. That's day 13. It's called United States versus Cox et al. TBJ. I think it means trial by jury. Day 13, May the 29th of 2012. Anchorage, Alaska. This file is 64 pages long. Okay. Audio server, all rise. His dishonorable, the court, this dishonorable United States District Court is again in session. Please be seated, ready. Yes, Your Honor, bring the jury in. All right, if you'll wait until everybody else gets settled, if you raise your right hand and be sworn. Plaintiff's witness sworn. I do. Please be seated. Thank you. Good morning, sir. If you could give us your name and spell your last name. Sergeant Tim Schoenberg. Schoenberg. Sergeant Schoenberg, who do you work for? Alaska State Troopers in Fairbanks. What do you do for the troopers in Fairbanks? I currently supervise the judicial branch of the judicial services at the courthouse. Okay, can you tell the jury on a sort of day-to-day basis what this means? The basis of it is I have currently right now 9 people that work for me in which we conduct security for judges. We transport prisoners to and from the court. We do process arrest, warrants and violations, conditions of release, those types. Okay, do you sit in court much as the marshals here are doing in court today? Very similar. That's what you do for the state? Yes, sir. And how long have you been doing that at Fairbanks Courthouse, I assume? Yes, sir. What's the name of that courthouse? The Rabinowitz Courthouse. Okay, and how long have you been doing that there? About 6 years. Tell the jury, if you could, how long you've been with the troopers. Almost 25. Almost a quarter of a century? Yes, sir. That's a long time, and what have you been doing with the troopers over that 25 years? I actually started out as a court services officer, which was actually in the courthouse itself, very similar to what these folks are doing right now. I then in 1990 went to the academy and basically promoted to state trooper. I worked the road for a couple of years and then went into statewide criminal investigation bureau. I joined the statewide CERT team. I went back to patrol, and from there I transferred to Saldatana. Worked a couple of years on the road down there, stayed on the what at that point was called the tracking team, but very similar to the CERT team. Stayed on the CERT team down there, got promoted from there to corporal, went to the Public Safety Academy in Sitka, where I was a full-time instructor. Spent there until 2000 and then transferred. Actually was promoted again to sergeant and was moved to Fairbanks in patrol. Stayed on the CERT team there in Fairbanks also, and currently still on the CERT team. Then a opportunity knocked to go down to the courthouse again, so I was promoted back down to the courthouse and been working there ever since. You mentioned a couple of times a CERT team. Can you tell the jury what that is? The CERT team is a special emergency response team. It's for those incidences, for let's say for like a hostage situation, high-risk situation, arrest, high-risk arrest warrants, things like that. Special emergency situations where the average patrol trooper won't be able to handle a situation by themselves. Okay, so you're still a member of the CERT team? I am. I want to inquire a little bit about your responsibilities with the court on a daily basis, both in court and people coming in and out of court. You know, what do you do with respect to that in terms of people coming into the building? We've got what I call a level 1, which is basically the first floor of the courthouse. At level 1, we have a very similar to when you come into the courthouse here. There's members of security. There's a magnetometer and a screening capability, and that is basically our first presence of security for the courthouse itself. If somebody comes in and has issues and security doesn't want to let them through, it's my job to intercede and make contact with them and determine whether or not they're going to be a threat to anybody that's in the courthouse, to the judges, any jurors, or any employees of the courthouse. So are those folks your primary responsibility? the folks you just mentioned? Yes, they are. Is there a descending order, or are they all just as similarly important? Any employee that's inside the courthouse is, basically it's even. The judges have their own area, take their own special risk, I guess, in that aspect because they're more in the light of where the criminals would be. All right. And with respect to your day-to-day work in the courthouse, do you have occasion when people come in and do things that you don't necessarily agree with or say things that trouble you in your capacity? I do. And have you ever heard of a bolo? I do, I have. Can you tell the jury what a bolo is? The bolo is an informational bulletin which advises us to incidences or actions by an individual or a party or a group or officer safety information for law enforcement officers. And most of the time, those bulletins are distributed to other law enforcement agencies as well. So have you created those yourself in the course of your career? I have. Have you ever received them from other law enforcement agencies? I have. What different agencies in terms of state or federal, that type of thing? For the bolo itself, it goes in general. I mean, we're talking state and federal. Do you get them from both? Both different? We do. Governmental systems? We do. And we try to share alike. For example, an individual may be carrying a concealed weapon and may be threatening towards law enforcement officers. That kind of bolo would be information our patrol officers would need. And they're working the street in case they encounter that individual. So if we have information indicating that, then we'll type up what we call a bolo and send it out to all law enforcement agencies. So in my jurisdictional area, where it'd be our university, the airport, North Pole Police Department, FPD, Fairbanks Police Department, and ourselves all would be aware of it. So it goes out to all those groups you just mentioned? Correct. All right. When did you first become aware, Sergeant, of Schaefer Cox? Well, I think in my first awareness was there was a domestic violence case reported in reference to Schaefer driving down the road. Okay, and he appeared in court with respect to that? Yes, he did, sir. But not in your court. No, I don't believe it was. Okay, are you familiar with him with other organizations in the Fairbanks area or association with other criminals? With other organizations? Yes. Which ones would those be? He was associated with the Liberty Bell. He was associated with the militia that was basically out of the Fairbanks area. Did you have occasion to observe Mr. Cox and others with respect to the court proceedings in Fairbanks? I have. And have you had occasion to be in court with respect to a court hearing involving Judge Quavar? Yes, I was. Do you recall the approximate time frame of that hearing was? December the 10th, 2010, I believe. And did he appear in court that day? He did. Did you, as a court security officer, were you in court during that hearing? Yes, I was. Could you describe to the jury the nature of the courtroom and the people you saw present in the courtroom that day? The courtroom itself is significantly smaller than this. This was a jury box very similar to this. There's a judge's bench similar to this. There's a bar just like it's sitting out here on this. And behind that bar is basically our wooden seats and bench seats, if you will. In front of it sits several chairs, or basically attorneys, and those types of folks that need to be present during the court. There's two tables, generally speaking. There's a plaintiff's table and there's a defense counsel's table. And there's an in-court clerk's desk very similar to what we have on here on this side. How about in the gallery? The numbers of people. On December 10th, there was 12 to 10, 15 people. In the gallery watching the proceedings, yes. Do you have occasion to become aware that proceeding was recorded, video recorded? I did. And with respect to the state courthouse in Fairbanks, are there rules concerning video recording? Yes, there is. What are those rules? Under Administrative Rule 50, it's not allowed. There has to be permission from the presiding judge, and if there's not presiding judge available, it has to be by the acting judge. And certainly the judge sitting on the bench needs to be aware of that, because we want to hide everything we do. We certainly don't want video recording in the courtroom. How dare they record us? We don't want to be recorded. Put your video cameras away. We can't do our evil doings in the dark if you're recording us. It's against the rules to video record Margaret Casey Rogers. And so during this hearing, we're talking about December the 10th of 2010. Yes. Do you know who Coleman Barney and Lonnie Vernon are? Let me make a quick point about my unexpected outburst. They have 10 to 15 video cameras in their courtroom at Margaret Casey Rogers. And do you know that when you're writing on your notepad, they can zoom up and actually see what you're writing? I saw it myself. But you can't take any notepads or pencils into the courtroom, and if you open your Bible when you're in the courtroom, the bailiff will come over and kick you out. And he's rude as hell. and you better not take any electronic devices in the courtroom, because only they can record what's going on. And they certainly don't want you to record what's going on, because they're evil, wicked doers, and they don't like to be exposed. Back to the transcript. And so during this hearing, we're talking December the 10th of 2010, yes. Do you know who Coleman Barney and Lonnie Vernon are? I do. Do you know them by sight? I do. Were they there during the meeting, if you recall? I believe they were. With respect to Mr. Cox's participation in the hearing, in summary, what did he say to the judge? He spoke from a scripted piece of paper initially, and then subsequently spoke freely on his own accord. Probably the thing that caught my eye mostly in regards to his conversations with the judge was in regards to threats that were being made towards the district attorney, Scott Mattern, and the judge itself, Judge Quavar. Comments of, people would rather come to your home and kill you in the night than speak to you. First of all, there's an entire video of the whole thing, and they've taken everything out of context. Okay, words to that effect. Okay, we placed in front of you a couple of DVDs, and I'd like to turn your attention to Exhibit 46. Yes, sir. And there's also 47. You viewed those before coming out into court today? I have. Initiated them as well? Yes, sir, I have. There are 4 clips with respect to those 2 CDs. Do they reflect the December 10th meeting you just spoke about? They would. And you were present in court? Yes, I was. And they are accurate as to what occurred in court that day? They are. We offer 46 and 47. No objection. They may be admitted, 46 and 47. Scrocky, if you could open the binder there, Sergeant, you have to flip a lot of papers to get to Exhibit 46. It should be tabbed for you. And Sergeant, these clips are actually from YouTube, are they not? Yes, they are. And let me remind you, folks, that it is a recording that is the evidence, and the transcripts are only to assist you understanding what you see or hear on the exhibit. There's not to substitute for that. I'm on 4601. Mr. Scrocky, are you all set? If we could play it, please. Lights, Denali, please. Sergeant Schoenberg, when Mr. Cox said, the sword of a righteous God is swift to destroy those who oppress the innocent, and the rest of those statements, how did that resonate with you in your capacity as a judicial court officer? It would have what I would call raised flags for me. There were several aspects, in my opinion, disrespect towards the court. One, there's an application which on our front door says no cell phones and no hats, yet Mr. Cox was defiant towards that. Some of his followers were also defiant towards that. There is the application that the person who is speaking would be sitting at the defense counsel's table in that situation. Mr. Cox and his group decided that it wasn't to their fitting for them, so that they would speak from the bar instead. From behind the bar, the side or the right, back here behind. From behind the bar. This side of right back behind, here behind. From behind the bar? So he's addressing the court from? Yes, sir. The microphone here? Correct. He didn't enter the well to the defendant's table? That is correct. Who was the judge? That was Judge Jane Kafar in her courtroom. So this speech of his continues. It did. And could I have a look at, and we'll play that. Play the audio and the video. Scrocky, stop it. Is the person there to the left with the white hair? Who is that? That is Judge Jane Kovar, District Court Judge. Okay, Mr. Cox references Judge Kovar and seeing her at a marathon and Fred Meyer, and then references a Scott. Who's the Scott that he's referencing? Scott Mattern is the district attorney. Was he at counsel table that day? Yes, he was. Yes? Yes, sir. Play the audio and video. In terms of your professional responsibility in the courtroom for the troopers, how did you react to that? I was basically standing by a steel door and I stood fast. I didn't move or didn't do anything. You don't want to escalate a situation if it doesn't need to be. At some point, do you recall what Judge Kovar did at the end of the hearing? Let me rephrase that. Did Mr. Cox make a statement to the judge, a request to engage, and if so, what did the judge do? The judge was basically going to set the next hearing for him. What kind of hearing was that? If memory serves me correctly, it was in conjunction with his current hearings, which would be setting the next hearing, to find out what was going to happen. Oh, so like a scheduled type of thing, not a trial. Okay, did he ask to have the judge engage with him with respect to certain things at the end of the hearing? I don't understand. Did Mr. Cox ask the judge to have a discussion with him about certain things relevant to his speech he was making? Yes, basically the judge was going to set the next hearing for him, and was basically telling him about not showing up. And Mr. Cox's statement to the judge was he's not going to show up. He's going to treat it like a Tupperware party. Like a Tupperware party? Yes. And was the hearing concluded after that? Shortly thereafter. Okay, let me show you what we've marked as Exhibit 799. Okay, before we get there, let's have a look at 4704. And is that part of the speech that Mr. Cox made as well? It is. Play the audio and video. Alright, I'm going to have you look at Exhibit 799. Now, Sergeant Schoenberg, there's a date here on Exhibit 799. Do you see that? I do. That's December the 10th. It does. And there's a text here with respect to being sent to J.R. Olson. Do you see that? Yes. Can you blow that up, Sean? Can you read that for the jury? It was the most amazing event thus far. We totally rolled them on everything. Reread that. It was the most amazing event thus far. We totally rolled them on everything. They didn't even put up a fight. I told them I wasn't coming back, so the DA jumped up and said he's not coming back. Arrest him now. Then I looked back, and then I looked back at the black robe and smiled like, we ready when you are, and she ran out of the room. Then we all just walked out. Does it say oops? Does it say black robe? Black robe. I looked at the black robe and smiled, like ready when you are. Yes. Did Judge Kovar run out of the room? No, she got up and left. Didn't run out in a panic not like it says here. Ran out of the room? No, she got up and left. So is that an accurate portrayal of what happened at the end of the court proceeding? No. If you can have the lights, please. Do you have occasion to see Mr. Cox in court after this event on December the 10th? On December the 10th. Did you have occasion to see Mr. Cox after this hearing on December the 10th? See him in court again later. Oh, yeah. What kind of hearing? That was actually in fell on December the 15th, in which was a calendar call hearing with Judge Patrick Hammers, a district judge. And what kind of case was it concerning? In continuation of his ongoing cases. Okay, and you said Judge Hammers was the presiding judge? He was a district court judge on that case at that day, which was a calendar call. Okay, with respect to you and Mr. Cox, did you guys have some interaction on that hearing? We did. And where did the first part of the interaction take place? Again, it started at the bar. Mr. Cox was on the other side of the bar. I was on the inside. Inside, basically, if you would call this the well area. I was on the inside of the portion. Mr. Cox wanted me to serve Judge Hammers with some paperwork. And did you do that? I did not. Did you have discussions with Mr. Cox about serving the judge with paperwork? I did. What did you tell him? I advised him that in order to get the paperwork to Patrick Hammers, or Judge Hammers, he needs to file it downstairs. And was that an acceptable answer to him? No. He wanted to still serve and actually set the paperwork on the judge's desk. And how long did you have this discussion about whether or not he could do something like that? 10, 15, 20 seconds at most. Okay, ultimately, what happened with respect to filing of that paperwork? We subsequently left the courtroom and walked downstairs. When you were walking downstairs, was Mr. Cox in your proximity? Yes, he was right next to me. Was there other people in proximity to you? The members of his group were also with him. Can you describe the members and who they were and how they were in relation to you and Mr. Cox? Well, Mr. Cox wanted to speak with the district attorney while I was in the courthouse, and there was some discussion that occurred between Mr. Arnie Saldwell, which is the district attorney for the Fairbanks area, and there was a conversation that picked up about, and I don't quite recall the words, but there was a conversation from his members to the district attorney about, that objection, Your Honor, hearsay as to the other members referring to Mr. Cox or to the other people that were there. What did you, the court, go ahead but lay more foundation. Can you name some of the people who were around you and who observed speaking about the district attorney? Let's see, there was Ken Thessing that was there, a gentleman by the name of Mr. Bartles. I think they call him the judge, if memory serves me correctly. Coleman Barney was there. There was another gentleman with brown hair. I don't really call his name right off the bat. Okay, so I'll get back to you on that one. I'm sorry. I'll get back to you on that one. I don't remember sure his name right offhand. Okay, what I want to ask you is with relation to their physical proximity to you when you were walking with Mr. Cox. Please describe that to the jury. As we left the courtroom itself, it's similar to these doors here, and there's both doors open, and you walk out, and Mr. Cox is on if my memory serves me correctly, he's on my right, and some other parties on my group, I don't recall which one, were on my left, and others were behind me, and we left the courtroom and proceeded. And mind you that Judge Patrick Hammer's courtroom is on the second floor and in the Rabinowitz courthouse. There's two ways of getting down from the second floor. There's a staircase that comes down, and then there's a set of elevators. The first thing you meet when you leave the courtroom is another courtroom, but then right after that is a second set of elevators. There's two elevators. Okay, I'm going to stop on page 23. Okay, picking up with page 23. There's two elevators that had the ability to go down to the level 1, which is the ground floor, and then a very short distance from there is the staircase that just kind of winds down and comes into the front lobby area. I kind of wanted to take the elevator, but I didn't feel that I could do that, so I continued to walk forward, and we took the staircase down. In terms of your physical space, where were these men? Both on my left and right behind me. And behind you? Yes. And Mr. Cox was where? I believe he was on my right. So we are talking like they're close to you and him? Yeah, we're all basically going through the door and probably very similar to that size right there, but shorter in height, okay? We're going through the door, and so they're on my left and they're on my right, and I'm basically at that point in time, I'm going to show them, look, we're going to go downstairs to file paperwork. I'm going to show you where to go. Okay, and did you do that? We made it to the lower right in the lobby area, if you will, of the courthouse. Did I specifically show him exactly where to go? No, I did not. But I did point it out that, the clerk, that's the clerk of the court, that's where it needs to go, while we had conversation that was occurring downstairs. Okay, we'll get to that. Okay, you mentioned Ken Thessing, yes, sir? Did you have occasion to observe Ken Thessing do anything that caused you to take a second look or be concerned? Mr. Thessing, well, initially in Patrick Hammer's courtroom, he addressed the judge on behalf of Schaefer Cox. How long did that last with Judge Hammers? I think we got 30 seconds out of it, in which Judge Hammers requested whether or not he was an attorney, and when he wasn't able to produce information or indicate that he was an attorney, the judge basically shut it down. All right, with respect to the physical aspects of the court and offices and things like that, did you have occasion to observe Mr. Thessing doing anything with respect to those items or to those areas? Yes, at a later time, but yes, and what time frame are we talking about? It would have been around December the 15th, but Mr. Thessing had come into the courthouse and had gone to level 3, which is the third floor of the courthouse, and was writing information down in regards to, there's a board that sits up on the third floor that tells where people are located by room number, and he was writing information down in regards to who was located where in the courthouse. Okay, probably ordinarily not a big deal, generally not. In connection with the activity you'd observed, that caused you some concern? It did. With respect to the December 15th discussions with Mr. Cox, you were wearing a recorder? I was. Can you tell the jury why you were wearing a recorder? Basically, it's pretty standard for our department to wear a recorder when we're making contact with parties and reference multiple occasions. In terms of your daily work, Sergeant, with respect to these two proceedings, would you call these normal? No. Okay, when you were meeting and discussing issues with folks, and I'm sure they were probably others that are not normal, fair to say, correct? And when you discuss issues and you meet with these folks, what do you look at? What do you look at your job as being when you do that? I try to mediate somewhat. Sometimes it's difficult to understand as a layman. It's difficult to understand why a judge makes a decision, and there's a presence of, putting faith into our court system that they make the right decisions. But secondly, that those that are our actions at the courthouse are peaceful. It's a venue for a person to discuss their case with a judge in reference to getting a decision, but to do it in a manner that is civil, peaceful, so that the people don't get harmed or people don't fall in harm's way. So you have a recording of this conversation with Mr. Cox on the 15th? Yes, I did. Okay, and there's another exhibit in front of you, 927. Do you have that? It should be a CD. I do. That contains the segment of the conversation you recorded. It does. And this recording, you've listened to it? I have. It's accurate as to what you heard on the 15th of December? Yes, it is. And there's a statement made by Mr. Cox concerning the troopers and his group. Is that accurate? Yes. Okay, we offer 927. No objection. It may be admitted. 927 admitted. Everybody at 927? Okay, go ahead. Play the audio. So Mr. Cox states in this conversation that we've got you guys outmanned and outgunned and can have you dead in one night? Yes. And you can give the jury a context of that conversation? What was going on there when he said that? I had multiple members of his party in this circle or the semicircle that we were in. Are you by yourself? I am. I'm in uniform. On December the 15th, it'd be long sleeves with a tie, but I'm in uniform and I'm having a conversation with him in regards to, he wants to talk about jurisdiction the court has over them in reference. There was the discussion in reference to a report that they had in which they provide information or obtained information in regards to the courthouse and what its credit rating was. And there was a secondary conversation, I believe it was, with Mr. Bartles in reference to sovereign nations and their rights and rights of some of the people. How close was Mr. Cox when he made the statement? At that point, he was on my left side. Were you guys conversationally distant? Yes, a close proximity, probably 3 to 4 feet. And was this downstairs? Yes, it was. How did you take the comment that he made to you? I tried to blow it off, make light of it. Again, trying to make it so that we're not escalating the situation. We're trying to keep things calm, so I laughed it off. Let him know, look, I'm not your problem. I'm easy to get along with. I'm easygoing. I want to try to establish a relationship in which we can communicate, because I felt that we were going to be seeing each other on a pretty regular basis, and that opens an avenue to negotiate down the road. Did you report what he said up the chain? Yes, I did. And did you make any changes to your personal life with respect to what Mr. Cox told you that day? I did. What were those? I have children, and my girls wanted to have a sleepover. I don't ask very often of my wife to alter her plans when it comes to things, but on this occasion, when we were discussing the sleepover, I asked her that we don't do that this weekend. It's not something that I want to do. So you canceled it? We did. How much sleep that night? Not much. When you reported the statement by Mr. Cox to you, who did you report it to? Initially, I reported it to, I believe it was Lieutenant Wall. Secondarily, I had a conversation with Lieutenant Lonnie Piscoya. Who is Lieutenant Piscoya? Lieutenant Piscoya, at that point in time, was the acting CERT team leader for the Fairbanks area. Do you know how to spell his last name for us? I think it's Piscoya. Okay, so is stationed in the courthouse too. No, he's actually stationed in 1979 Pegger Road, the state troopers headquarters in Fairbanks. Oh, is that where Ron Walsh is stationed? Correct. You did a report about this incident, and when did you make that report? Actually, sometime later. I think it was quite sometime later. Okay, why the delay? We took no enforcement action. Okay. Did you do anything with respect to the courthouse or your attention with respect to the courthouse in light of those statements? Absolutely. And what would that have been? I had a meeting shortly thereafter with my team. We increased the coverage for security in the courthouse. We increased coverage in the courthouse itself on weekends. In addition, we made additional steps to pick up certain judges and bring them to the courthouse so they wouldn't be followed or felt that they were being followed. Did that include Judge Quavar? It did. Judge Hammers? No, I don't believe so. I think at that point in time or shortly thereafter, he was actually out on leave. Affirmative. But okay, Magistrate Raisley was also on that because she was working weekend arraignments. Do you know who Martin Guerrero is? I do. Who is Martin Guerrero? He actually is in the criminal division of the clerk of court, so criminal side, clerk, chief clerk. Yeah, does he have a family? He does. How about Ron Woods? Do you know who he is? The judge or the area court administrator? I guess there's two. Yes, there is. So one's a judge, one's a retired judge. Affirmative. Ron Wood. And then there's Ron Woods, the area court administrator. Does he work in the Rabinowitz courthouse? Ron Woods, the area court administrator, does, yes. Okay, and he's part of the court system. He is. Does he have a family? He does. A very proud grandfather, actually. All right. How about David Romer? Do you know who David Romer is? I think it's Roner. David Roner. Roner, yes. Is he familiar to you? He is. How so? Objection, Your Honor. What's the relevance? I can't hear you. Objection, what's the relevance? Going through a list of Mr. Roner, what's the relevance to the court to this testimony here? Mr. Roner was the individual who was involved with the traffic stop of Trooper Bell and who Mr. Cox acted as a lawyer for. Miss Lamoureux, Malik Jones. The court, Scrocky, Malik Jones, excuse me. You're just asking the witness to identify. Well, he has, this person. He has particular things that he has done with respect to the courthouse along similar lines. Mr. Traverso, there's no bearing with this testimony here. He's talking about what he remembers from the courtroom. He has Mr. Roner is outside of that. That has nothing to do with this. Well, I think we're on a different subject now, but it's also lunchtime. So let's take a break and we'll come back to this at 1:30. Folks, follow my instructions about recesses. Come back at 1:30 ready to go. The court, you can step down. Thank you, Judge. I took this as just identifying people. Was there some purpose? Was there some other purpose for this? Scrocky, yes, Mr. Roner is somebody who is giving the troopers issues with respect to coming into court and not abiding by court rules. The tie-in is that Mr. Roner was the individual that Malik Jones stopped. And if you recall the testimony, Mr. Jones was given the phone. He said Mr. Cox acted as Mr. Roner's lawyer at similar conduct of similar member of the group. Well, I think you can inquire about the witness's knowledge of that individual, so the objection's overruled. Miss Lamoureux, Your Honor, the court, may I raise something? Sure, you can raise the roof. Miss Lamoureux, the witness that we plan to call following Trooper Schoenberg is Fairbanks Police Department Detective Peyton Meredith. And he was present. He interviewed Mr. Vernon, and Mr. Vernon was arrested. We selected 10 clips. Some of those clips we plan to offer against Mr. Vernon as admission of party opponents. 3 of those are the clips which we can be used against as evidence of the conspiracy against all defendants. And I wasn't sure how you wanted to handle those limiting instructions for the jury, whether you wanted to do them as a group or one by one as we went through the clip. I'm not sure exactly what limiting instruction you're suggesting. That we only offering certain of those clips as evidence against Mr. Vernon. There are his admissions. They are his admissions. How do I know which is which? We've identified them in a pleading we previously filed, and I can list them for you if you like before we inquire of the witness. And we can instruct the jury that way if you like. Well, I'm happy to instruct the jury. I think we did talk about this, but I need to know before you offer it what to instruct them with. Miss Lamoureux, I have the numbers here. If you have, these are tied into exhibit numbers? Yes, they are. Okay, tell me. Exhibit 4501, blah, 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 are the clips that we plan to offer. Only against Mr. Vernon. All right. Okay, thank you very much. Anything else before we break here? Give me and the defense a time estimate here, counsel. We should be resting this afternoon. But into the afternoon, obviously, now. Yeah, about 3:30 or so we expect. All right. All rise. This matter is in recess until 1:30. All rise. This dishonorable United States District Court is again in session. Please be seated. Okay, bring the jury in. All right, be seated. You can continue. Yes, Your Honor. Direct examination continued by Scrocky. Sergeant Schoenberg, at the break you were talking about a guy named David Roner. Yes, sir. Do you have any interaction with him at the courthouse? I have. Within the time you're talking about here, December-ish or so, it's in the time frame that Schaefer Cox was in the courthouse around that time, yes? What was the contact you had with him? What do you observe? Mr. Roner attempted to come into the courthouse and he refused to be screened at the front entrance. So in essence, security couldn't check him for any weapons or check his gear for any kind. Anything that could potentially cause harm. He was showing up for a case in reference, if memory serves me correctly, a suspended license before Judge Funk. And as a result, he refused to come to the court to go before Judge Funk. I went out to the front security area, spoke with him. He disagreed with the philosophy, saying that it was affecting his rights. I told him that if he wanted to proceed into the courthouse, he would have to go through screening. Did he ever do that? He refused not once but twice. Okay, Scrocky, can we have the lights, Denali? I'd like to show you Sergeant Schoenberg, Exhibit 504-9, which was taken from the home of Mike Anderson. If you could, look at the document there, Sergeant. On the left-hand side, do you recognize these names? Exhibit 504, Trooper Gary Tolip is a trooper. He currently works for me now. In 2010, he was actually working on patrol. And how about Ron Wall? That would actually be Lieutenant Ron Wall. He is currently the Deputy Commander of D Detachment in Fairbanks, Alaska. Were you aware of Mr. Cox's visit to Mr. Wall's home? I am. Actually, Lieutenant Wall spoke to me about it. Okay, do you know these folks? Do you know who these folks here are? Curtis Studler, a female DHS, and Tom Studler, DHS. I know their names. I don't know them personally. How about Trina Bucamp, TSA trainer? Do you know who she is? I believe Trina and I have actually met. Yes. Oh, you have. Okay. If we could go to 50428, again, the same notebook. There's two names here on the right-hand side. Do you see those names? I do. The first name is who? Ron Wall. Again, that's the Deputy Commander of D Detachment in Fairbanks, and Lawrence Piscoa is also a Lieutenant in D Detachment of Fairbanks. You can make the name right out there. I'm circling Mr. Piscoa's name. Yes, sir. Mr. Scrocky, could we go to 446, please? Exhibit 446, do you recognize the names on this sheet I'm highlighting in blue, Sergeant? I do. Superior Court Doug Blankenship is actually the presiding judge for the Fairbanks Superior Court. And for the Fairbanks Court system, for the Fairbanks Court system, Leonard, I can't make out the writing. Do you want us to blow it up for you? Yes, please. I believe Leonard is actually a judge in Bethel. Okay, certainly Robert B. Downs is a Superior Court judge in Fairbanks, Alaska. I can't put a finger on it, but I believe Hamilton is also a Bethel judge. Definitely Paul Lyle is a Superior Court judge in Fairbanks. Mike McDonald is also a Superior Court judge in Fairbanks. Mike McConaughey is also a Superior Court judge in Fairbanks. So is Randy Olson. Was Mr. McConaughey, or I guess Judge McConaughey, assigned to Mr. Cox's case? He was the last judge actually to sit on the case. Do you know in Fairbanks what is the reference might be here where it says officer in Gaffney? If you don't, you don't. That's fine. I don't believe. I'm just trying to remember from the lawyer's directory where that was actually McConaughey's old address. I don't recall. All right, how about down below here? We have a district court list. Do you recognize the names there? Raymond Funk is a district court judge who has subsequently retired. Patrick S. Hammers, who was also a district court judge at one point. Actually, I think he was just recently a district court judge when Schaefer Cox had come up. He used to be a magistrate prior to that, and Judge Jane Quavar had been a long-standing district court judge. Okay, so she was the one you saw in the video off of YouTube that was played? Yes, sir. All right, Mr. Scrocky. If we could have 446-9, please, and I'll represent this one out of the search of the Vernon residence. Sean, if we could blow up the first half of the page, we'll start there, please. Take a look at that for us, Sergeant Schoenberg. Just take a second to examine it. Does that appear to be a diagram or something that you're familiar with? There's basically a layout. It would look like a pencil sketch of what it would look like inside the courtroom. And there's in Fairbanks a reference up at the top that says Courtroom 201, correct? That's on the second floor. Yeah, it is. And does that appear to be a diagram of Courtroom 201? It's a good indication of Courtroom 201, not the scale, correct? Can you help us with the listing here in the upper left where it says, can you read me what that says? It says trouble, black pants, gray shirts. Can you relay to the jury what that might be referencing? The judicial service officers in Fairbanks, Anchorage, Bethel, Palmer, Ketchikan, Kenai area are the courtroom service officers. The majority of the court services officers are in gray shirts and black pants. Most of them wear a vest, very similar to what I have on. If not, they have a vest underneath them. And then they're in the same kind of weaponry and gear that I would basically be carrying when you see me when I was standing up. Okay, so the courtroom, because you have a blue shirt like yourself and then a gray shirt, you correct? All right, and here on the left it says, what does it say here, if you can read that? Exit for cops. I'm sorry, exit for, or entry for cops. Does that say door maybe? Yes. Is it that accurate? Somewhat accurate. It actually goes before the jury box, but somewhat accurate. Okay, let's just try the jury box goes on there. On the left-hand side of the wall, is there any entry for cops? There is. Okay, and then the jury box is here. Yes, well, yes. Okay, and then basically we have a listing. Can you see what that says there? Schaefer. We have another reference there. Do you see that? An exit crew. And I want to talk about this side of the page. The side where it says up there, where it says judge. That's where the judge would sit. And then here is sort of, which would be like Denali sits there. Yes, it'd be the clerk of court there. Can you read where it says beneath recorder? Yeah, the recorder of all proceedings are recorded, and when they go on the record, so it's an official recording. I'm sorry, what? Also, does it say underneath recorder? I'm sorry, judge escape and then steel door, cops entry to jail. So there's two things going on there in terms of exits. There's an additional separate door for prisoners and law enforcement to get through. Okay, so there are two doors on that side. There's actually three doors, but only two are exit. Okay, does that appear to be something that was drawn in your observation by somebody in the courtroom? Yes, absolutely. Let's go down to the second half of the page. Let's talk about courtroom. Courtroom 201 on the left-hand side, and then the rest of that page. Could you tell us if you have an idea of what that reflects? At the Rabinowitz courthouse on the second level is basically the courtroom, is what I call level 2. It's a balcony type display. In other words, you can look over the rail down into the lower lobby. That would depict where courtroom 201 is located. And in my opinion, it shows the pathway which goes to the stairwell, which is an opportunity to exit or stairs down to the lower level. So follow the finger, right? Yes. So are those what are those there? That is a staircase that leads from the lobby to the level 2. So would this be this be level, what level then? That would all be level 2, but it's a balcony, so you can actually look over into the lower level. And also, can you read what it says right there? Troopers under here. What does that refer to? Our troopers' office is located underneath the balcony, next to the elevators. So that's for the most part accurate, relatively. Scrocky. Can we scroll back up to the top, Sean? There's a reference here at the bottom where it says Arctic entry. Can you see that? I do. And to the right it says, what does it say there? Security team. Can you orient the jury as to the Arctic entry and if there's a security team that's listed there? How would that fit with the dynamics of the building structure? In this situation, I wouldn't summarize that as law enforcement security being in there. And I'm sure that when you were selected as jurors, you probably come through those doors. So there's two sets of doors. The same thing in the Fairbanks courtroom. There's two sets of doors before you enter into the courtroom. The security team, it's my summarization, but that's a security team for this incident. Outside the Arctic entry, yes sir. This would be public space out here. It is. If we could have page 153, page 2. On this page, 153-2, do you see something familiar you recognize in terms of diagram, Sergeant? I do basically have a layout here. Again, it's the courthouse or the courtroom itself, and then an exit plan or an indication for an exit plan leading down the balcony area down the stairwell. And there's on the very bottom of the page, let's blow this up. I'm sorry, that's okay. At the very bottom of the page, in essence, it's a table with a black spot in the middle. That's the level 1 at security. That's very similar to if you come through the front door on this side. Here's what you're walking into. You meet with the security first. That's the magnetometer. That's the x-ray machine, and that's what that indicates to me. The second floor again, following the blue line stairs, this is the security station right there, correct? And they would have to, that I circled at the bottom area, exit. I'm sorry, but they would have to exit all the way through the right because they wouldn't be able to go through the left side. Security is there. All right, how about up here at the upper left-hand side? There's another diagram. That looks to me, do you see that? Like, again, the inside of the courtroom. Affirmative. You have vertical lines going across, indicating to me that those are benches, which is what is actually sitting up in Fairbanks and Arctic entryway. The bar, if you will, with a little swinging door, would have the reflective there in the middle that I'm circling. Yes, sir, all right. And it would be very similar to what we have right here in this courtroom. A hallway on the left and a jail door, would be on the right of that circle. The jail door to the right. And if you've been into Fairbanks Courthouse, there was a hallway if you went back there, because you actually have to walk around the past court and go into a hallway in the back. Not a lot of people do that. Bear with me just a second. Scrocky, go to the top of page 153, and this is 153 out of the Cox residence. There's an exit crew leader listing. Do you see that? I do. Who would that be? Kenneth, I would suspect that Major Thessing is Ken Thessing. You're familiar with Mr. Thessing? I am. There's a quote here. If you touch, did you see that? Can you read that? Yeah. If you touch me, you are acting in defiance of the law at all peril, own peril, perhaps. It could be own peril. Excuse me. If cops around, go straight to cars. If not, press. I can't read the end of that. Okay. If not, press. All right, Scrocky 203, please. And I'll represent the exhibit came out of the Barney residence. Do you recognize the schematic that are on the exhibit, sir? Yes, sir, I do. Sean, if you can blow up the top half this. And what is the schematic of approximately? This is another hand sketch drawing of the layout of the courtroom. All right. There's a couple of entrances on the right-hand side. There is, or exits, I guess. There's a judge's exit into the jails. It says cops exit to garage. And the bottom half indicating the hallway, second or balcony. Is that what I would anticipate? Would this be the second floor again? It is. So what's there? What's here? I think that would represent the courtroom 201, which would be Judge's Quarters. And is this accurate where it says balcony with the arrow? It is. and then you would proceed over down the stairs, yes. And based on your knowledge of the building, what's that represent down at the bottom? That rectangle with the two oval lines. That would indicate to me the magnometer and the screening X-ray machine, level 1 security. Okay, thank you, Scrocky. Could we have 203, page 6? This is the next page of the exhibit, Sergeant, where it says material and it lists item number 1. Can you read the first item number 1? Pistol, rifle, body armor, ammo, mags, mag holders, grenades, grenade launchers, radios, or phones. How about number 4? Number 4, let's go to number 2, then go to number 4. Gear and car. And then number 4 is Schaefer's closing words, quickly get it to cars. How about number 5? Get geared up, concealed, back to the courtyard, fan out and observe until exit team comes out. If we could have the lights, Madam Clerk. Sergeant have gone through these exhibits and hearing what Mr. Cox said to the court. Had you known about this ahead of time, what would you have done to your understanding or job with respect to the courthouse if you had read these things before the court appearance? Objection, Your Honor. Before Mr. Traverso. Objection. That's the objection sustained. Mr. Scrocky, how long did you talk to Mr. Cox on the 15th of December? If memory serves me correctly, between the courtroom and exit, it was about 39 minutes. Okay, 39 minutes, and at some point during that conversation, he stated you about being your outmanned and outgunned, and we could have you all dead in one night. Yes, he did. Did you have any physical contact with him after that statement? Yes, I did. Tell the jury what it was. I shook his hand and we exchanged pats on the back, similar to what would potentially be classified as a hug. Scrocky, that's all I have. Questions? I have. Thank you. Mr. Traverso, cross-examination. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir. You were a trooper for 25 years, correct? Or have been a trooper for 25 years, still the present? Okay. August. All right. And what? August, we'll hit that. We'll reach that. What part of that were you on patrol for? I went to the academy in June of 1990, so after graduation of the academy, 3 months later, 12 weeks of training on FTO, 1 year probation. How many years as on patrol, though? Altogether? Yeah, 14. Okay, I think it's a fair estimate. And how many arrests do you think you made in those 14 years? A lot. Okay, a lot. Would there have been an arrest for an assault in the 4th degree? Would there have been an arrest for assault in the 4th degree? Yes. Objection, relevance. Okay, assault is. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Overruled. Assault in the 4th degree, in this particular one of the provisions for assault in the 4th degree, is if you place someone in fear of imminent physical harm. That is, you didn't even touch them but you placed them in imminent physical harm. That can be criminal charge called assault in the 4th degree under Alaska state law, correct? I think you're pretty close on these words, yeah? Okay, thank you. In this case, when you were in the courtroom with Mr. Cox, you've known him as basically a civil disobedient, an agitator, someone who raises a lot of challenges about the court system, correct? As an agitator? Yes, well, let me rephrase it. Thank you. Do you know him through the Second Amendment Task Force? I do. Do you know him through the Alaska Peacemakers Militia? I do. And you know him through the Liberty Bell? Yes, I do. Okay, do you know what Liberty Bell means? Do you know what that organization represents? I basically have an understanding of it, I believe. Okay, and that is if a person who is in the chain, if you will, that's a text that's sent out, and as a result, that text being sent out, other members show up on the scene to make sure in their eyes that things are going the way that it should be going, which means in my eyes the law enforcement has more to do. Okay, and more worries? All right, and now when you were in the courtroom, you mentioned that Mr. Cox was showing disrespect. Is that right? He was. He wasn't acting in such a way that would cause you to believe that he was engaging in conduct that could cause someone physical harm? I guess that would be how you would classify it. Okay, and on one hand, he's indicating that he should be all be friends, and on the other hand, he's telling us that he's telling us that he's going to kill us. Did you believe that he had committed a criminal offense? At what point? When you heard those words of disrespect, as you stated earlier in your testimony to the judge? Yes, I would say he committed a crime. Did you arrest him? No, I did not. That's insane that he didn't commit no crime. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. When did you write a report? These people are like scared to death of like speech. When did you write a report in this case? For which part? You mentioned you wrote a report based on your dealings with Mr. Cox at his court hearing on December 10th, yes? When did you write your report? I believe it was 2012. 2 years later? Yes. So in that 2-year period of time, you never thought it was important to arrest Mr. Cox, right? Not for events occurring back in December 10th, 2010, right? No, I think what I stated, sir, was we didn't take an enforcement action at that point. You've known him to challenge the jurisdiction of the court, correct? Yes, he did, and he would be very vocal about you were touching on it, and the court system was a credit rating. He's challenging, as you know, he was challenging the court system because he thinks it's a business entity of some sort. Is that right? Yes. They were trying to show me documentation of that. And when he was in court, he didn't have a firearm, right? No. And you don't know who it was that did that YouTube, right? On the day, who did the YouTube? No. Okay, but because you didn't allow that to go on in courtroom there, correct? Well, we don't. There's a sign that indicates that it doesn't occur. But from my perspective and my training and experience, I didn't opt to challenge that in the realm. I didn't want to make things worse than what they could potentially be. How many security personnel were in the courtroom? Just myself. Okay, did you call for assistance from your contingent downstairs and the troopers? They were aware of it, yes. Okay, did you call them upstairs? No, I did not. Okay, now when you went downstairs, as I heard that recording, you were laughing, right? I was. And you engaged in conversation with Mr. Cox, correct? And yes, and okay, several other members. Okay, you pointed out to Mr. Cox that he needed to file paperwork in the clerk's office downstairs rather than upstairs in the judge's chambers, correct? Yes, I actually did that in the courtroom, though. Right, you were trying to get him to understand that he couldn't file paperwork. He wasn't trying to attack the judge, was he? He wanted to go serve paperwork on the judge. Right, he didn't want to attack the judge. You didn't see him trying to attack the judge. You didn't see that as a threat in any way, did you? I don't believe we did. We didn't get that far because I didn't let him go there. All right, but you thought he had committed a crime earlier, right? Yes. But you never filed a report saying that he had violated the law, did you? No, we took no enforcement action at that point. But you didn't say anything about a charge that he had violated the law, correct? No, we did not. Okay, thank you. We did not take enforcement action. Thank you. And you were speaking of there were two Woods. One is Ron Woods and the other Woods would be Mark Woods, a former Superior Court judge. Yes. Okay, thank you. Traverso, I have no further questions. Mr. Dooley. Sergeant Schoenberg, I'm Tim Dooley for Coleman Barney. How many federal officials were in the courtroom that you've been talking about? Did you know? Do you know? I couldn't tell you, sir. All right, thank you. On what day are you talking about? Any day. You have to be more specific, sir. That's all I need. Okay, thank you. Go. No questions. Redirect examination by evil federal corrupt prosecutor Scrocky. Sergeant, you were asked a couple of questions by Mr. Traverso about the Liberty Bell. Yes. Do you know who would always answer the Liberty Bell phone call network? No, I don't personally know. You don't know how that number went back to Mr. Cox? I was aware that he was in tree sometime later, but objection. I didn't know it could go directly to him. Okay. I'll withdraw it. You were asked some questions about Mr. Cox challenging the jurisdiction of the court. Yes. That's kind of complicated legal stuff, isn't it? Yes, it is. Did he seem to have a command of the law? Yes. Articulate of the law? I would agree. Knowledge of the law? Yes. Kind of a lawyer? Kind of like a lawyer? I would agree. Done his research? Yes. Put a lot of time into it, yes. Have stacks of legal paperwork, yes. Seem to understand it to you. Did he understand it? Did he understand it? Did he seem to understand what he was talking about with regard to the law? Answer. Aye. Objection calls for speculation. I'll withdraw it. Scrocky. You were asked some questions about the not filing a report, yes? And your response was not taking investigative action on it. And you were asked some questions about calling down below to troopers downstairs, yes? You testified they knew about Mr. Cox being in court. We were aware of the hearing. My team was aware of that hearing was going on. It's something I prepped them for. Okay, is there a reason you don't want to confront or antagonize in that kind of setting? If so, please explain it to the jury. Again, I'm trying to, part of my job there is to somewhat be of a mediator to keep the peace, you know. This is a venue in which they can air their concerns, and as long as it's peaceful, we can proceed forward. There's a time and a place, in my opinion, that if you're going to take enforcement action, it needs to be immediate and swift. This is not the time or the place to do it. There's one person in that courtroom, me, that's basically heading up the security detail, and the audience outweighs the number of people that were sitting at that door. So I decided at this point in time, this is not the time or the place to take an enforcement action. 1, 2, we're still talking, and as long as we're talking, we're doing well. Were you outmanned that day, sir? Yes, sir. That's all I have. Thank you, Sergeant Schoenberg. You may be excused. The witness, thank you. That's the end of Schoenberg's testimony. My goodness.